So the next aspect of leadership is communication. The idea that we constantly and effectively communicate to the people within our team. One of the rules of communication is the rule of 7, which is you need to say things 7 times before your people actually are even listening. Now this came really from Jack Welch, who was hailed as CEO of the century. He was the guy who was at the helm of General Electric and really led that to great fortune. And he used to say that, he says, at the point at which I feel as if I'm bored of communicating the same message, it's only at that point that the team are even really starting to listen. So the idea of constant repetition of the message, the drip, drip, drip effect, it starts to get through. So the 3 things that we need to do with regards to our communication as a leader is firstly, knowing when to speak and knowing when to listen. So again, Simon Sinek's a really good person to listen to in this aspect here. So there's a time when the leader should speak first. And that is when you're wanting to demonstrate some vulnerability. Speak first, because you can set the tone for everyone else. And again, I'll use Jack Welch as the example. He famously talks about, and I think they did about 1,000 acquisitions and mergers within his remit as CEO. And he talks about, I think it was an investment bank that they bought for billions, and it was a disaster. And he's very happy to say, I made that mistake. We looked at the numbers and the numbers looked great, but actually the cultural fit wasn't right and it was a disaster for the business. And I made that mistake. I signed it off, it was my mistake. Now think about that kind of example to the rest of the team, the rest of the organization. So even if the boss is admitting his mistakes, what does that say? It's okay to admit mistakes. Now clearly we want to learn from the mistakes, but it's okay to demonstrate vulnerability. That's when it's good to speak first. It's also good to speak last. So when we're going in, because you can set the tone, when you're going in and you're actively seeking people's input, it would be wrong to go in there and assert a position, because potentially people will just fall into line with your position and you might be missing out on the diversity of thought and opinion around the room. Far better, and this is where to communicate, people think it's to speak. Communication is about listening. It's about listening as well as speaking. And so therefore we need to make sure that we are giving people their time to speak and listening intently to what's being said. But not just about the words that are being said, what's the tone that sits behind that? What's the meaning? And really, what's the emotion? So this idea of you listen with your eyes, you listen with your heart, you listen with your ears. So really understanding what it is that people are saying. So that's the first thing we need to do, when to speak and also when to listen. We also need to communicate stories. So the example I've just given you about General Electric and the failed acquisition, that's a story that people will understand the key message behind. So there might be other things that are happening in your business that's a good story to demonstrate a particular value. How do we make sure that we're using stories to really communicate a point? Because, facts tell, stories sell. The purpose of leadership is to communicate to influence. So we are selling people on an idea. So therefore, what's our good use of stories? Throughout these videos, I'm giving some examples. I'm telling you stories about NASA. I'm telling you stories about General Electric, about McDonald's. You'll remember those. And that's the important thing, is you'll remember it and you'll be able to do something with the memory. And then finally, what we need to communicate is, the strategy. We talked about that earlier, but actually let's break that down. So what are the goals? What are the goals for the business? What does the plan look like to support the achievement of those goals? And what are the actions that each individual or each department need to take in order to make this strategy actually happen? So the communication is really, really important, because what we want to move people from is the idea of a wonderment of what is it that I'm expected to do here, conjecture of I think this is what's expected of me, to focus. I'm crystal clear on where we're going and what my role is on that journey.